On the day of the wedding, I picked up my wife's intimate clothing at the door of the makeup room. When she pushed the door open and came out, her red lipstick was smudged, her eyes filled with tears. I knew that inside the makeup room was the ex she had never truly let go of. I also knew, half an hour later, my bride would run away with her ex, and while chasing after her, I would be crushed to death by a speeding truck. My bride, held in her ex's arms, would watch me with her own eyes, dead, yet unable to close them. Chapter 1. The Jasmine standing in front of me was still smiling and chatting brightly, yet I was still trapped in the sensation of my bones and muscles being crushed inch by inch. Pressing my fingers to my aching, dizzy temple, I slowly realized I seemed to have been reborn. At this moment, I should be standing with Jasmine at the entrance of the hotel lobby, welcoming the wedding guests together. Only, her mind was no longer here. She kept lowering her head to check her phone, her gaze unfocused, her expression anxious, clearly restless. And as I watched the way her eyes drifted toward the makeup room, and noticed how her fingers had turned faintly pale from gripping too tightly, I suddenly calmed down. Before long, it was as if she had finally made up her mind. Jasmine looked up at me and said with an awkward expression, "I think my makeup smudged a bit. I'm going to the makeup room to touch it up." Before I could respond, she lifted her wedding dress and started to walk inside. A sharp pain stabbed my heart. Instinctively, I grabbed her wrist. "Wait, I'll go with you." The urgency on her face froze. She unconsciously bit her lower lip. "Idiot. I'm just touching up my makeup. Why would you come with me? Aren't you welcoming guests? Aren't you greeting relatives? Was it really just a makeup touch-up?" I knew the answer perfectly well, yet I still forced a smile, my grip tightening unconsciously. "My wife is beautiful even without makeup. The elders will arrive soon anyway. After we finish welcoming guests, don't we still need to change our looks? You can touch it up then." Jasmine seemed to want to say something, but in the end said nothing. Her eyes turned red with anxiety, feeling the vibration in her hand. Her impatience only grew. She hurriedly glanced at the message on her phone, and her face went pale. In the end, she didn't even bother to explain. She yanked her hand free and rushed out. I lowered my head, staring at the spotless marble floor of the five-star hotel, and let out a silent, bitter laugh. I knew that message came from the ex-boyfriend she could never forget. They would be in the makeup room next to my wedding hall, pouring their hearts out to each other, kissing until they couldn't bear to part. And my bride, who hadn't even officially married me yet, would be so lost in the moment that she would leave her intimate clothing behind at the door. In my previous life, I would have collapsed. I would have been unable to believe it. I would have desperately wanted to know why. This time, I only want to let them be together. A bastard man and a trash woman. Let the trash take itself out, and stay locked together forever. Chapter 2. Jasmine was someone I had chased for 3 full years before finally winning her over. The first time I met her was at 7-Eleven in the morning. She was working as a cashier, being scolded by a middle-aged woman who was pointing at her nose and yelling, "Which eye of yours saw me open this bottle of drink, and you still want me to pay for it? You're just a poor wage worker. Are you trying to get me to call your boss out or what?" Her round almond-shaped eyes were filled with tears, her face flushed red, her voice was weak, yet her attitude was firm. "I saw it. You were the one who opened this bottle." The woman glanced at the surveillance camera. There was an obvious blind spot in the beverage area, and her confidence grew even stronger. Her voice rose several notches. "Do you have any proof? I'm telling you, slander carries legal responsibility. You know that. I'm going to file a complaint against you." Seeing the woman's finger about to poke Jasmine in the nose, I didn't even think before stepping in front of her, waving my phone at the woman. "Auntie, I was just filming a vlog. I happened to record you twisting open the bottle and drinking half of it. I suggest you think carefully before you keep talking." The woman's face shifted between red and white for a moment. In the end, she threw 5 yuan onto the counter, cursed under her breath, and stormed out. Jasmine lowered her head and wiped away her tears, then looked up at me with a shallow smile that revealed dimples. "Thank you. My name is Jasmine. Let me treat you to something to eat." The moment I saw her smile, I admitted it. I was completely, utterly hooked. Gradually, we became familiar with each other. I pursued her for 3 whole years before she finally agreed, and our relationship had always been very stable. That illusion lasted right up until moments ago, until the instant she ran toward the makeup room. From the very beginning, she had been honest with me. Her previous relationship had ended due to many external factors, leaving her no choice but to break up. I didn't mind her past at all. If anything, it made me feel even more sorry for her. During our time together, I gave her all my patience, gentleness, and care. Over those 5 years, I watched the smiles on her face grow more frequent, the gloom between her brows gradually replaced by sweetness and reliance. I was deeply satisfied, until this very moment. Half an hour before the wedding, I watched her abandon me without even looking back, running desperately toward the makeup room, and it was at that moment that I made up my mind. I calmly watched Jasmine rush into the makeup room. The door wasn't fully closed. Through the gap, I could see her throwing herself into a man's arms, sobbing softly. Even though I had already made my decision, my heart still sank inch by inch. I had never realized that marrying me made her feel that wronged and miserable. The two figures clung tightly to each other. As emotions surged, a piece of her intimate clothing fell at the doorway. I didn't pick it up. I simply turned around and left quietly. 20 minutes later, Jasmine came to the lobby, the tip of her nose slightly red. I finished touching up my makeup. I looked deeply at the faint redness at the corner of her eyes, then nodded noncommittally. She seemed a little guilty. She slipped her fingers into mine, interlacing them and holding our hands in front of her, looking at me seriously. "Philip, I love you." In her clear almond eyes was the familiar dependence I knew so well, but it no longer stirred even the slightest ripple in my heart. I lowered my gaze and smiled, using the excuse of greeting guests to gently free my hand. She seemed to sense something, yet didn't dare ask. She could only follow closely beside me like a little tail, puffing out her cheeks and acting cute. "Philip, what's wrong with you? You feel kind of strange today. Are you hiding something from me?" I absent-mindedly looked away. "It's nothing. I prepared a surprise gift for you. You'll find out once the ceremony starts." She relaxed a little, her brows softening as she smiled sweetly at me. And 10 minutes later, at the wedding venue, the officiant asked, "Groom Philip, do you take Miss Jasmine to be your lawful wife, to respect her, cherish her, whether in poverty or wealth, in sickness or health, in good times or bad, and to care for her forever? Do you agree?" Under Jasmine's almost pleading gaze, I smiled, lowered my eyes, and answered slowly, word by word, gentle yet firm, "I do not." I calmly watched as the blissful smile on her face froze instantly, the color draining away inch by inch, her entire body swaying under the spotlight, as if she might collapse at any moment. Chapter 3. The entire venue erupted into an uproar. Jasmine's father and younger brother slammed the table and stood up, only to be forcibly held down by several friends of mine whom I had warned in advance. At the same time, a few groomsmen shoved Berlin onto the stage, gripping his shoulders tightly as he struggled to break free. Under Jasmine's panicked gaze, I smiled faintly at her. "Jasmine, your groom isn't me, is it?" Amid the rising waves of murmurs, I took the microphone from the officiant and apologized to the guests below the stage. "Sorry to let everyone witness such a farce. This man here is the bride's ex-boyfriend, and judging by how reluctant they are to part, perhaps I'm the one who should be stepping aside. Jasmine, there was no need for you to secretly meet him before the wedding, pouring your hearts out to each other, nor was there any need for you to put on such a pitiful, heartbroken, can't let go act in front of him. For the past 5 years we've been together. No matter what you wanted, I always found a way to put it in your hands. Have I ever treated you unfairly? I don't believe I have. Today's wedding, I can even give that to you." Jasmine trembled all over, barely able to remain standing. She forced herself to reach for my hand, her face drenched in tears. "Philip, it's not what you think. I was just momentarily out of my mind. I wanted to say a proper goodbye to him. My heart has always had you in it. I truly wanted to marry you, to spend my life with you. Aren't you always the most tolerant of me? You said it yourself, that I could be completely unrestrained in front of you, that I could act without fear, that I could just be myself, no matter what I did. You would always forgive me. This time I really know I was wrong. Can you forgive me, please?" I looked at her face, filled with sorrow and helplessness, with utter indifference. My heart was so calm that even I was surprised, because the old me had never been able to bear seeing Jasmine shed even a single tear. Even if her eyes reddened just a little, I would panic so badly I'd want to rip my heart out and offer it to her. So this was what she looked like when she cried. Apparently, it wasn't that big a deal after all. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of Berlin's flushed face and tightly clenched jaw. I smiled slightly, then gently lowered my head and wiped away the tears on Jasmine's face. A flicker of hope ignited in her eyes as she looked at me through blurred tears. She had always known exactly how to soften my heart. After 5 years together, I understood her thoughts even better than she understood herself. She truly was afraid, and she truly did regret it. I believed that when she abandoned me and walked into that makeup room, she hadn't actually planned on leaving me for good. I also believed that in my previous life, when she instinctively shoved me toward the oncoming wheels, she hadn't realized the consequences. But, so what? Instinctive reactions are the most honest of all. I had already died once. I should have learned something from that death. Spilled water cannot be gathered again. And my sincerity, Philip's sincerity, was not that cheap. I let out a soft, mocking laugh and looked at her. "Jasmine, I'm not an idiot. Do you really think I didn't notice what you two were doing in the makeup room just now?" Chapter 4. I can satisfy all your wishes and tolerate all your tempers. In every argument between us, I was the one who stepped back. I didn't mind. When your parents suggested that after your brother graduated, he should be arranged into a mid-level position at my company, I agreed, despite the pressure from my partners. But Jasmine, there is one thing I've told you many times. I cannot tolerate emotional drifting or disloyalty. We are adults in a relationship. You can't want this, want that, and want everything at the same time. From today on, I will no longer be the one who favors you. At my signal, several groomsmen efficiently dressed Berlin in the groom's suit. I tilted my head slightly and slowly curled my lips at him. Mr. Berlin, are you willing to marry Miss Jasmine, to respect her, cherish her, whether in poverty or wealth, in sickness or in health, in good times or bad, and to care for her forever? Are you willing? Berlin clenched his teeth in fury and glared at me. You're insane. A freak. A lunatic. Jasmine and I just met once before the wedding. We didn't do anything immoral. Is that a crime? You're just incompetent. After all this time, you still couldn't make Jasmine completely forget me. One single text from me, and she slipped out of her own wedding. No matter how crazy you act, you're nothing but a discarded loser. I calmly rolled up the sleeves of my white dress shirt. Well said. Unfortunately, that's not what I wanted to hear. The next second, my fist slammed hard into his face. Berlin's head snapped to the side, and for a full 3 seconds he couldn't even react. I picked up the microphone again and held it near his lips, my voice calm and gentle. I'll ask again. Mr. Berlin, are you willing to marry Miss Jasmine, to respect her, cherish her, whether in poverty or wealth, in sickness or in health, in good times or bad, and to care for her forever? Berlin's eyes were so red they looked ready to bleed. He let out a furious roar, broke free from the groomsman's restraint, snatched a champagne bottle from the stage, and swung it at my head. I sidestepped, grabbed his arm, drove an elbow into his chest, and threw him hard to the ground with a clean shoulder throw. Under the blinding spotlights, amid the cheers and shouts filling the hall, Berlin was beaten again and again, utterly unable to fight back. When I asked him for the 5th time, a faint, barely audible sound escaped his throat. I'm willing. I straightened my slightly wrinkled shirt and smiled faintly at Jasmine. Jasmine, the groom is now in place. I wish you a long life together and many children. Consider this wedding banquet my gift to you. At this moment, Jasmine's hands were shaking uncontrollably. She didn't spare Berlin a single glance. Instead, she lunged toward me in a mess, trying desperately to grab my hand. Philip, I was wrong. I really was wrong. Please forgive me. I was just momentarily confused. Why did you have to take it this far? You really don't want me anymore. I gently brushed her trembling hand away. The heartless one isn't me. Leaving the wreckage behind, I walked out with my groomsmen and close friends as Jasmine finally broke down in uncontrollable sobs. A few minutes later, I heard a sharp slap from behind, followed by Jasmine's father roaring in fury. Look at the mess you've made. Jasmine's crying abruptly stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. I could almost feel her pleading gaze landing on my back. Yes, over 5 years together, I had satisfied countless unreasonable demands from Jasmine's father on her behalf. Because of that, she had gained more importance within her family, so much so that she forgot. The affection she received from her family had never been as pure as she believed. I let out a soft sigh and turned around. Jasmine covered half her face, tears streaming like pear blossoms in the rain, staring at me stubbornly and full of desperate hope. Philip, I looked at her in silence. Fragments of memories replayed in my mind. Her playful smile, her face scrunched up after accidentally biting into a sour tangerine, the reliance and closeness in her eyes when she looked at me, and the image of her abandoning me without hesitation, running toward the hotel exit. After a long moment, I smiled at her with release. Goodbye. Accompanied by my closest friends, I calmly stepped out of the wedding hall, apologizing to the departing guests and arranging for them to enjoy dinner at the upscale buffet restaurant next door. My parents only sighed and patted my shoulder. Jasmine was never a good match. I lowered my gaze slightly, hiding the warmth in my eyes. Dad, Mom, I embarrassed you. It doesn't matter as long as you're happy and healthy. Nothing else matters. A close friend draped an arm over my shoulder unwillingly. Philip, you spent tens of thousands on that family. You're really just letting them off like this? I pushed my glasses up and smiled gently. My story with Jasmine ends here. There's no need for me to do anything else. What's meant to come will come on its own. Chapter 5. I had spoiled Jasmine, and her insatiable family had long since grown accustomed to being fed by me. All I needed to do was take back the benefits that never belonged to them in the first place. As for the rest, I only had to sit back and watch the show. I took a month-long leave from my business partners and brought my parents on a 1-month tour of Europe. It was partly to clear our heads, and partly to avoid the inevitable harassment from that family. $1 million in bride price, a high-paying job, a newly delivered Riverview apartment, plus all sorts of other benefits. Based on my understanding of Berlin, there was no way he could come up with that much. Jasmine never contacted me again. Her father and younger brother, however, nearly blew up my phone. When I refused to answer their calls, they switched to long-winded text messages. From emotional appeals and moral reasoning, to soft coercion laced with threats, I never realized this family could write so well. I calmly exited the messaging app, turned to my parents, and smiled. Next stop, let's go to Cappadocia and ride a hot air balloon. They were more than happy to oblige. Friends back home continuously sent me updates about Jasmine's family. Jasmine seemed to have been depressed for quite some time. Her father and brother jumped around relentlessly, forcing her to beg me for forgiveness and reconciliation. Yet she stubbornly held on and never disturbed me with a single word. Perhaps they thought I would feel satisfied that way. There was no need to over-explain that I didn't care anymore. I simply accepted their good intentions with quiet gratitude. And after more than half a month, the family finally fell silent. Had they given up, or were they plotting something new? I didn't care. I was enjoying the peace. That was, until I returned home with my parents, and saw my villa in complete chaos, with Jasmine's family brazenly occupying it. I fell into silence. After a month apart, Jasmine looked much thinner. Even her once softly rounded cheeks had sunk in, her chin sharp. In stark contrast to that was her slightly protruding belly. Jasmine's father, Aaron, slumped on the couch and gulped down a mouthful of beer. With bleary, drunken eyes, he let out a loud burp. Son-in-law, don't you think this is pretty shameless? You got my daughter pregnant, and now you think you can just walk away without a second thought? And you made such a scene at the wedding, shouldn't you compensate us properly for emotional damages? Burp, of course, we're family. No need to talk like strangers. It's true my daughter was tangled up with someone else, and I'm a reasonable man. You vented your anger. My daughter's belly is big now, and she knows she was wrong. Hurry up and go get the marriage certificate. I won't ask for more bride price, just keep everything the same. Jasmine's younger brother, Luis, also shamelessly leaned in. Brother-in-law, didn't Apple just release the latest model? You see, I calmly looked at Jasmine, who was avoiding my gaze. Jasmine, how many months along is the baby? She lowered her head, pale fingers twisting together. 4 months. I was silent for a moment. My gaze swept over the dark red bruises on her arms, and my voice remained even. Is that so? In that case, you can stay here for now. As for everything else, we'll talk after the child is born. What I'm responsible for, I won't shirk. Jasmine bit her lip and said nothing. Aaron slammed his palm heavily onto my shoulder, his tone thick with threat. What do you mean by that? Son-in-law, the child in my daughter's belly couldn't possibly not be yours. Are you trying to deny it? Wait until the child is born. You wouldn't make my precious daughter give birth out of wedlock, would you? Our family has status, we can't afford to lose face. A sharp pain exploded in my shoulder. I simply stared at Jasmine's pale face. After a long moment, I smiled faintly. 5 million. After the child is born, I'll give you an additional 5 million as bride price. All other conditions remain unchanged. Aaron's breathing grew heavy. Just as he was about to keep pressing the issue, his foot slipped on an empty beer bottle. He staggered and collapsed back onto the sofa. I turned and walked away. Chapter 6. In the days that followed, Jasmine seemed to pull herself together and began focusing on taking care of the pregnancy. She was also trying hard to make up for what lay between us. Almost every day, she sent me old photos of us together, sometimes with just a few simple words attached. Even I hadn't known she had secretly taken so many pictures of our moments. The coffee we drank while looking at the night view at the old Bund. The top of my head when I squatted down to tie her shoelaces. My focused profile while watching a movie. Our reflections in a roadside floor-to-ceiling window. Fingers interlaced. The signboard of the convenience store where we first met. Candied hawthorns on a winter street. And the look on my face, slightly troubled yet indulgent, when she held an unbearably sour skewer to my lips. I lowered my gaze to the familiar photos on my phone, pressed my lips together slightly, and felt a familiar throbbing pain start up again at my temple. Just then, the front desk called, her voice tinged with difficulty. Boss, your ex. Miss Jasmine insists on coming up. She says she personally made soup for you. What should we do? I saved the photo on the screen. Call her a car and send her home. I still have work to do. I won't be coming down to see her. About 10 minutes later, the front desk called again to inform me that Jasmine had left, but insisted on leaving the thermos behind. I glanced at the message she had sent me. Philip, this is chicken soup I woke up early to stew for 3 hours. When the weather turns cold, your headaches tend to flare up, remember to drink it. I'll head back now. I turned to look at the gloomy, rain-heavy sky outside and slowly clenched my fist. Half an hour later, heavy rain poured down. I was escorting my partner's younger sister back to the consultation office. As I held an umbrella and was about to see her into the car, Jasmine suddenly rushed out from a corner through the rain, shock and disbelief in her eyes. Philip, who is she? I ignored Jasmine, gently gestured for the girl to get into the car, and carefully straightened the hem of her dress that had fallen outside. Be careful on the way. The girl cast a meaningful glance at Jasmine. So this is her? I smiled without answering. She then nodded politely toward Jasmine. Hello, you must be Philip Sr.'s ex-girlfriend. Miss Jasmine. Right. I'm Regina. I've heard a lot about you. The color drained inch by inch from Jasmine's face, even her lips turning pale. You too. Regina playfully wagged a finger at her. Don't overthink it. Philip and I are just ordinary friends, not the kind of relationship you're imagining. Jasmine seemed slightly relieved, but Regina smiled and added, though back in university, I did write Philip several love letters. Unfortunately, he rejected every single one of them, without mercy. I glanced helplessly at Regina's pretty profile. You're not a kid anymore, stop talking nonsense. All right, we're done here. Go on home. Regina blinked at me and waved. See you next time. The car drove off. Jasmine grabbed my arm tightly, madness flickering in her eyes. Who is she? Philip. Who is she? How can you change your heart so quickly? I calmly pushed her back under the shelter of the eaves. Regina and I aren't what you think, Anne. I haven't changed my heart. You're still pregnant. It's not good for you to get soaked in the rain or worked up emotionally. Jasmine clenched the hem of her loose dress, tears shimmering in her eyes. Philip, I don't feel well. Could you take me home? I lowered my gaze, looking at her fingers that had turned pale from gripping too hard, and spoke evenly. I'll call an ambulance for you, if possible. I'll have Berlin come take you away. You really shouldn't go back to that house anymore. But Jasmine wasn't listening. She lowered her head and stayed silent for a long time, so long that I thought she wouldn't respond at all. Then suddenly, she looked up and gave me a faint, pale smile. I understand now. I was the one who was wrong first. I won't make things difficult for you anymore. I just still want to do something for you. When the baby is born safely, I'll take the child and leave far away. I won't disturb you again. But before that, please give me some time, so I can slowly detach myself from this relationship. She gently took hold of my hand, her face full of pleading. Didn't you used to like the soup I made the most? I just want to bring you soup for another 6 months. Is that okay? That might be the only thing I can do for you in the time ahead. A tear trembled on her eyelashes, about to fall. Amid the patter of rain, I heard my own voice, cold, calm, and detached. All right. Chapter 7. Jasmine did not break her word. Over the next 2 months, she didn't send me any messages to disturb me. She simply came to the company every day on time, delivered a portion of Gastrodia tonic soup, and then took the emptied thermos back with her at the same time. Even the front desk girl began to feel sorry for her and started probing my attitude toward Jasmine in her words. I even overheard her quietly complaining to a colleague. The boss's heart is way too hard. When they were together, he treated her like a treasure, and now he just turns his back without hesitation. Even I feel like Jasmine is pitiful. She was just momentarily confused and made a mistake, but does she really deserve to pay such a heavy price? I lowered my eyes and looked at the WeChat message Jasmine sent me after several months of silence. Philip, about the household registration for the child after birth. I'd like to talk to you. Could you come over for dinner tonight? I replied with a simple okay. That evening, Jasmine cooked a full table of dishes herself. Almost all of them were my favorites. Her figure had become much heavier. She wore a loose maternity dress, her hair tied into a bun. Between her brows and eyes still lingered the same cleanliness and naive sweetness from when we first met. She sent Aaron and Luis out. We ate the meal calmly. Jasmine attentively served me food, softly chatting about the trivial things that had happened over the past few months. Her expression still carried reliance and closeness, and I listened quietly, as if nothing had ever happened. After the meal, she personally poured me a glass of Lafite Rothschild. This is the red wine you like. You'll sleep more soundly tonight. I gently swirled the glass, inhaled the rich aroma, and fixed my gaze on Jasmine's face. She seemed a little uneasy and shifted her eyes away, lowering her gaze to the flickering candlelight on the table. I set the wine glass down and smiled gently at her. Thank you for the hospitality. Then I raised my voice slightly toward the door. You can come in now. Under Jasmine's uneasy and confused gaze, several police officers in uniform entered the room. Ma'am, we suspect you of poisoning Mr. Philip, and of being involved in a death incident from 3 years ago. Please cooperate with us and come with us for investigation. Jasmine's eyes widened in disbelief. She clutched her belly with both hands, her face deathly pale. I stood up and smiled at her gently. Thank you for taking care of me for the past 3 years. Jasmine, no, I should call you Rose. You look very much like your sister. Only, you were never her. I've remembered everything. 3 years ago. Jasmine already. How could I have forgotten? Jasmine, no. Rose collapsed to the floor, her body utterly drained of strength. It was as if she had lost her final support, slumping there with no expression left on her face. I remembered. I hadn't been reborn. The one who died in the car accident wasn't me, it was the woman I loved deeply, Jasmine. That day, I had been holding a diamond ring I'd prepared in advance, my heart full of joy and nervous anticipation, ready to propose to Jasmine. On her way to meet me, Jasmine saw her younger sister Rose arguing with her boyfriend Berlin in a makeup room. Anxious, Jasmine rushed forward to stop them. The two struggled and ran outside. The next second, a car that had lost control charged straight at them. In the chaos, Rose instinctively shoved Jasmine toward the oncoming wheels with all her strength. I stood 5 meters away and witnessed the entire accident. In a dazed blur, I saw massive amounts of blood gush out like water from a ruptured bag, staining the concrete road red and soaking the red velvet diamond ring box in my hand. With her back to me, Rose frantically and anxiously checked Berlin over. "Are you okay? Were you hit by any debris? That car just now was really..." Before she could finish, she seemed to suddenly realize something. She turned back slowly and stiffly, her gaze landing on Jasmine's blood-covered body. The next second, the man wrapped his arms around her firmly and pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Be good. Don't look." They held each other closely, and I, like a broken puppet, knelt in the pool of blood, clutching Jasmine's cold, broken body. Amid overwhelming, violent grief, I lost consciousness, as if a part of me had died with her. When I woke up again, suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, my memory was displaced and fragmented, because my subconscious couldn't accept Jasmine's death. The me who woke up in the hospital mistook Rose for Jasmine. They were sisters, though their personalities were completely different. Their brows and eyes bore an 80% resemblance. I forgot the proposal, forgot the car accident, forgot that she had a younger sister, forgot many things. Jasmine's father, already dissatisfied with Berlin's family background, had a sudden idea. He let Rose impersonate Jasmine and continue a relationship with me, all the way to discussing marriage. Under their carefully woven lies and Rose's deliberate imitation, I projected my love for Jasmine onto Rose without reservation. In my eyes, she was my beloved, until the wedding drew near, and the after-effects of my headaches grew more and more severe. On the day of the wedding, I remembered the car accident that had led to Jasmine's death. Only I had empathically mistaken myself for Jasmine. Chapter 8. Aaron, Rose, and Luis were all arrested by the police. Because she was pregnant, Rose was released on bail pending trial. Aaron and Luis were not so lucky. I provided the police with evidence of their plot to poison me. Tests conducted on the tonic soup Rose delivered to me every day revealed the presence of heavy water, colorless and tasteless, yet capable of causing chronic liver and kidney damage, in the red wine she poured for me. Investigators also detected a neurotoxin that accelerated liver and kidney failure. Aaron and Luis were the masterminds who supplied the toxins. All of them would face the legal punishment they deserved. On the other side, Rose had her lawyer pass a message to me. She was willing to turn state's evidence and testify as an informant, on the condition that she could see me one more time. I agreed. It had only been a few days, yet Rose looked as if she had lost all vitality. Her chin was sharp, making her belly appear even more alarmingly large. Noticing my gaze fall on her abdomen, she lowered her head and gently stroked it, her voice soft as a passing breeze. "When did you know that this child wasn't yours?" I calmly poured her a glass of water. "From the moment you told me you were 4 months pregnant." Under her slightly startled look, I curved my lips faintly. 4 months ago, I was in Milan, Italy, attending an investment and trade forum. It lasted a full week. Before that, I was in Silicon Valley with my partners for an entrepreneurs forum, and to survey the latest trends in AI and venture capital. That took 2 weeks. And there was another week. One of my partners had sudden appendicitis at a dinner, and I stayed with him in an American hospital for an entire week. I was away the whole month. Because of that, you even had a huge fight with me. When I got back, I made you breakfast every day for a full month before you finally calmed down. Don't you remember? Rose didn't answer. She only gave a dazed, bitter smile. I placed the water beside her hand. Besides, Berlin came to find me and told me everything. On the very day Rose told me she was pregnant, I was stopped by a familiar figure on the side of the road. It was Berlin. He looked unkempt, stubble all over his face, hair in disarray, eyes bloodshot. I gave him a cold glance and was about to walk past him. He grabbed my shoulder. "The child in her belly is mine." I hooked my lips slightly, and he clutched his head in pain. We got back in touch at a class reunion 4 months ago. I didn't want to go at first, but the class monitor kept insisting. I don't know what possessed me. I just wanted to see how she was doing. But the moment I saw her, I realized I still couldn't forget her. At the reunion, she told everyone she was getting married. I drank a lot. She came to comfort me, and then I know she still had a trace of attachment to our past, but the bigger part of her heart was still occupied by you. I frowned slightly. I had completely lost patience with his incoherent rambling. I brushed his hand away indifferently. "So you came to speak on her behalf?" Then why tell me you're the real father of the child? He stared straight at me, desperation and madness surfacing in his eyes. Erin and the others never thought much of me. They'd rather let her keep going down the wrong path and use the child as leverage to control you. Don't let them fool you. I calmly brushed the dust from my shoulder. Mr. Berlin, right now it's that family who refuses to leave me alone. They don't think much of whatever scraps they could squeeze out of you. In their minds, I'm the ideal son-in-law. Since you claim to be so deeply in love, is the only solution you could come up with to beg your former romantic rival to show mercy and fulfill your relationship? Or did you come to the wrong person? I turned and left, no longer sparing the shattered Berlin another glance. Chapter 9. What he didn't know was that when he roared, the bigger part of her heart is still occupied by you. Jasmine's family's conspiracy was also playing through my in-ear headphones. I had installed the latest security system on the market in my villa. Although Rose had freely entered using the fingerprint access I hadn't had time to delete. Every word and action of theirs was fully recorded under my surveillance. From the very first day they stepped into the villa, my phone had been receiving alerts from the security system. I knew Erin had once again racked up massive gambling debts outside and was desperate for me to pay them off. I knew Luis had gotten into a fight at a nightclub and accidentally severed someone's hand tendon. If he couldn't come up with enough money for a private settlement, prison was waiting for him. I also knew Rose had already sold every gift I'd ever given her. Yet it still wasn't enough to cover the holes her father and brother had dug. And through my earphones, Jasmine's father was coercing Rose with threats and inducements. Philip isn't easy to fool. Once the child is born, there's a high chance he'll take it for a paternity test. When that happens, everything will be exposed. Rose, that kid used to be completely obsessed with you. There's no way he suddenly became this heartless. You need to coax him more. Before the baby's born, you must get the marriage certificate. I've already picked out a high-value accidental death insurance policy. Once you're legally registered, buy it for Philip immediately. When you're living under the same roof, if he meets with some accident and dies young, you and the child will be the primary heirs to his estate. With that insurance payout on top of everything else, your brother and I won't just be set for now, we'll be set for life. I subconsciously rubbed my fingers together, waiting for Rose's reply. On the other end, Rose was silent for a long time before finally letting out a barely audible mm. It was like a stone suddenly dropping into place. I gently closed my eyes and let out a soft, low laugh. Rose's face showed an expression that was half crying, half smiling. So you knew from the very beginning that when I brought you soup, I had ulterior motives. I nodded. I also knew that when you realized I wasn't going to turn back, you decided to abandon the marriage registration plan and instead chose to take my life first, so that once the child was born, you could inherit everything. Rose was silent for a long time before speaking. Philip, whether you believe it or not, I never once wanted to hurt you. When you were dating my sister, I envied her so much. I envied that she had found such a considerate, perfect boyfriend. I envied the way you looked at her, with nothing but gentleness. And I envied why my own boyfriend had to be so mediocre and ordinary. When you woke up in the hospital and looked at me with that tender, devoted gaze, I simply couldn't bring myself to say that I wasn't Jasmine. My dad and brother definitely had their own agenda. But I truly fell in love with you. This child was just an accident. I felt guilty toward Berlin. I once had feelings for him. But after meeting you, I realized everything I had with him before was nothing but a joke, like fireflies compared to the sun and the moon. Philip, the only person I ever truly loved was you. So why were you so cruel? I only secretly met him once before the wedding. I was just unwilling. To you, I could only ever be my sister, but to him, I could finally be Rose. But I truly wanted to spend my life with you. Even if I could never use my own name for the rest of my life, I was willing. Under my calm, indifferent gaze, her rising agitation suddenly settled. Her voice softened, warm like winter sunlight. Philip, I was just too in love with you. Since I can't have you, then completely owning you isn't such a bad choice either, is it? I closed my eyes and stood up. If there's nothing else you want to say, I'll be leaving. Rose suddenly grabbed my hand, her cold fingers forcing their way between mine, gripping tightly. Her gaze was stubborn and pleading. Philip, when you were with me, was there even one day, just one moment, when the person you were looking at was me? And not this face deliberately imitating my sister's expressions and mannerisms. I lowered my gaze to the faint glimmer in her eyes, like the last spark before a flame dies, and slowly pried her fingers away. I heard my own voice, steady and without the slightest ripple. No. The air seemed to freeze for a brief instant. Rose's lips trembled, but no sound came out. The light in her eyes had already turned to ash. Chapter 10. With Rose's testimony, Erin and Luis were sentenced to 8 years in prison for attempted poisoning. On the very day the verdict was delivered, Rose endured a day and a night of difficult labor in the hospital and gave birth, with great hardship, to a baby boy. Berlin took her away. As for whether she lived well afterward, I didn't care. What cannot be obtained is always restless. Those who are favored act without fear, but when the unattainable becomes attainable, when the favored lose that favor, relying only on those vague memories of youth, how far can their road really go? I came to Jasmine's grave and placed before her a bouquet of her favorite flowers from when she was alive, peony roses painted like oil canvases. It was deep winter. The north wind was biting, the air sharp and cold. I leaned against her icy tombstone, just as I used to, and softly told her about everything that had happened over the years. Jasmine, I'm sorry it took me so long to remember you. You must have waited a long time. I was a coward. That's why I wove for myself the illusion that you hadn't died, and why I gave others the chance to take advantage of me. Do you remember Regina? She's my partner's younger sister, and a PhD in psychology. Thankfully, with her help, though it took a long time and cost a great deal in consultation fees, I finally remembered everything. Was it you, reminding me from somewhere unseen, that allowed me to recall the scene of your car accident before the wedding? Even if my memory wasn't entirely accurate, Rose once asked me, during those 3 years when she took your place, did I ever fall in love with her? To be honest, I'm not sure. But when everything is built on lies, is there really any meaning in pursuing that sliver of supposed truth? Aside from the sound of the wind, the world was utterly silent. As I breathed, a snowflake drifted down into my palm. It was the first snowfall of the winter. After a long while, I stood up, brushed the snow from my shoulders, and carefully wiped the snow from her tombstone. If we were to be drenched in snow together one day, this life would count as growing old side by side. I curved my lips slightly at the photo of Jasmine, smiling as brightly as flowers. Jasmine, thank you, and I, too, will continue moving forward.